My name's Lucy Carter and I'm a lighting designer. I create lighting designs for installation pieces, theatre, opera, dance and ballet and live events. I currently live in Macclesfield in the Peak District, or very close to the Peak District, but I'm originally from Norfolk. So I think the first time I even knew about lighting for performance was when I was at university studying contemporary dance and drama. And the main thing that I think set me off on a path to play and discover with light was that I learned that performance had meaning. It wasn't just for entertainment, that there was meaning and ideas and themes behind the work that would help the audience navigate it or go away after they'd seen the performance and think more deeply about things. And I found that incredibly exciting to understand that I could learn stuff from theatre as opposed to just sit and enjoy it. And the other thing that I discovered when I was studying contemporary dance, especially, was how beautiful bodies were in space and light, and how with light you could reimagine how the body looked and reimagine how the space looked. That was where I discovered light. And after that, having done a 3-year honours degree, BA honours degree in dance and drama, I decided that I was going to go into lighting design, because throughout that experience I'd been lighting my own choreographies and lighting everybody else's choreographies, and just learning all the time about how light could help live performance. So at that point, while I was at Roehampton Institute studying dance and drama, it was very much self-taught exploration of lighting. And then we did have 2 lighting designers who came in to light the 3rd year exams, who I helped push the ladder, to push the taller scope around. They taught me so much. They taught me something a little bit more formal about how to construct a lighting rig. But after I graduated, I went and did a postgraduate diploma in lighting design at Central School of Speech and Drama. And that was before degree courses existed in lighting design or technical theatre, really. Although even if there had been a degree course, I wouldn't have known about it, because I didn't discover technical theatre and design for theatre until I went to university. So I did a 1-year course at Central in lighting design, where I learned how to draw lighting plans, learn how technically to realise those ideas and put it into a lighting plan, and start to develop a kind of more practical process for realising, as opposed to putting a light on a boom, moving it around, getting somebody to stand in it and play with the colours that I wanted to use, which is what I'd done prior to going to Central. For me, it has to start with the investigation and research around the idea or topic that I'm going to be working on. So I believe, and the way I have to create is that I learn a lot about the subject. I read around, I go in Google wormholes. One area of research for me might lead to another one that seemingly feels a little bit unrelated to the original project, but teaches me new things and kind of gives me more ideas. So that's where I start, with just reading, looking, observing, thinking. And then for me, the biggest part is a collaborative approach. So whoever I'm working with on the projects, if they're self-instigated projects, it's likely I'm going to have a team of people that are going to help me realize it. So there might be a composer, there will definitely be a lighting programmer, and they become my collaborators, and we share ideas. On a bigger project, you'd have a set designer and maybe a choreographer or a director. You'll have a costume designer, a sound designer, a composer. So lots of people, and we would share our investigation and our research and our ideas with each other. And that leads essentially to a massive interdisciplinary kind of crossover of ideas. And that's where the project kind of starts to come together. But that's what I find the most inspiring, is learning from other people about their response to the original idea or topic or theme for the production, which in turn gives me more ideas and new thoughts that I go off and research again. So it's quite an in-depth pre-production process. And it's not until after I've had those ideas for the production that I then start to think about how those ideas could be realized in light. So they might be very intellectual ideas, they might be visual ideas, but not necessarily lighting ideas. And I then look at the concepts that I've come up with or the thoughts and just think about how I could portray that in light, or how light could help me tell that story, or how light can portray that emotion that we've decided we want for the production. And then after that is when I would start to consider the technical aspects, what equipment I might need, what equipment's available, what might be available in the venue, and whether I have a budget to bring in extra equipment. But also to consider the venue and the technical considerations that presents you with, how restrictive it is, how open it allows you to be, where the positions that you've got to rig the lights on. So all the time I'm thinking about my ideas, but trying at this point to find practical ways, technical ways to realise it. And then I've got to draw a rig plan. So it all has to come after I've been thinking and researching for quite a while. And the technical bit is just a small, in my opinion, is a small but necessary part of the process. The other kind of large part of the process for me is the creation period. So once I've decided what equipment I'm going to use and where I'm going to put it, we then go into the space, whether it's a theatre or just a found space, or it's the space that the production is going to take place in, or the installation is going to take place in. I then spend time, as much time as there is available, experimenting and trying to figure out if what I've rigged is going to realize the ideas that I want or portray what I want it to portray. And that, depending on the time available, can be a kind of responsive period where all the collaborators see, hear, feel, look at everybody else's offering and respond. Likewise, we respond to each other's offering at that point. So we're in the space together, rebounding ideas, showing each other, playing each other things, and finding the best way in each moment, step by step through the production, the best way to stay true to the ideas and themes and concepts, and how we're going to portray that to the audience. So I think, that's my process, I think. For me, restrictions are just another challenge, really. They're another part of the process. They almost come as another form of idea. So if you have a small budget, that's an idea, right? That's a concept. You've got to stick within your budget. But so budget is always a restriction. The venue quite often is a restriction because the ceiling might be very low, or it might be very small, or it might be very large. All of those things provide you with a context that you have to design within. So whether they're a restriction or just another challenge, another element of what you have to consider when you're designing, I don't know. Things like knowing if a live performance is going to go on tour is a restriction. If it's going to go on tour, you need to know the boundaries with which it's going to tour in. So often that might be how big the truck is that the lighting will fit into, how many people you have to rig it on tour, and how long you have on tour to start with an empty space and put the first evening's performance on, how long you have. So they all add to your considerations as you're designing. I think one of the big things that comes maybe later than the venue and the budget is the set or the spatial design that your collaborators come up with. So often working with set designers, they might put in walls, they might put in ceilings, they might put things hanging in the way where you were thinking you might hang lights. They might restrict the space a lot, or they might want to make the space really open, which provides its own set of challenges because you have to decide then what you are and aren't going to light. Speakers, sound have to have space to put their equipment so that everything can be heard, and that often later on in the process, possibly once you've already designed your rig based on the space and the set design, speakers have to go somewhere, and often that comes a little bit later, and you have to then adapt again to allow space for everybody's equipment to go. What other restrictions might there be? Time is a very large restriction on my process. Time in the space. Time is money, as the producers love to tell us. But if you don't have very much time, it can be a really big challenge to realize your ideas once you're in the space. And I mean time in the theatre. It can be a massive challenge, and you end up compromising to some extent because you just don't have the time to realize it. But that has to be accounted for in your design as well. So the amount of time you have once you're in the theatre is important to think about when you're creating, because if you're too ambitious with the design ideas, you'll never realize it, and then it will be a fail because the audience won't read the production in the correct way. I think that's plenty of restrictions. I think all my collaborators that I've collaborated with over the years are an inspiration to me, because as you're working on a production, they inspire you to look in new directions. They have a different outlook on the piece. They have different experiences in life. They have different references that they use throughout their design process. And I always say that my job is such a learning process every day. I'm always discovering new artists or new visual references or new ideas and new concepts, new influences and inspiration from my collaborators. And, I'm lucky that I get to work with maybe 10 different collaborative teams a year on new productions. So all their knowledge kind of crosses over into me, and I then go away and say, oh, I've not heard of that person, or I've not understood that concept, and I go off and research it. So I learn all the time new and find new inspiration from my collaborators. But otherwise, I think there's no specific, there could be a specific kind of visual reference that I get a bit obsessed with for a few years, like Bauhaus architecture and art was one of my favorites for a while. I use nature a lot. I used to when at the beginning of my career, I used to get National Geographic magazines. I think my dad paid for it for me as a Christmas present once, and I got it for years and years, and I used to save them all. And that used to be a massive inspiration source for me. I used to just go and look through the National Geographics and find relevant articles and imagery relevant to the production I was working on. But I still realize that I use nature all the time, because when you're looking out the window and you see the light changing all the time, or the way light hits something as you're walking around, or when I'm shopping, I might see a shadow on the ground and say, well, how's that shadow being created? Or you see a reflection, how's that being created? And then I have to have a look and I have to figure it out. And over the years, I think I've got better at understanding where it's coming from quite quickly. But nature's just the world around us is a massive inspiration for me. Interestingly, when I do my lighting designs, I don't do naturalism and realism very well on stage. But considering that I think that I use nature a lot in my lighting designs, what I realize is that I use it and then I abstract it. So I'm not trying to put nature and natural lighting environments onto the stage. I'm trying to take it and its sensation or its visual impact and put that onto stage to create something new, to create a new experience of that. To be very honest, I think the biggest challenge in my career has been having a family and continuing to work as an international lighting designer. Whenever I get asked that question, that's the thing that springs to mind first, is that having a family, maintaining a relationship, paying a mortgage, all of those things are the biggest challenge, because lighting, being an international lighting designer in live performance, is really challenging. It's very time consuming. You have to travel the world. You have to be available for very long periods of time. You work, once you're in the theatre, you're often working 12 to 13-hour days, 6 days a week, which doesn't mean you can get back to pick someone up for childcare. You're not even in the same country to pick them up for childcare. So that's the biggest challenge. It's a demanding job. If you want me to tell you about the biggest challenge in terms of productions, I would say that I did a production of Peter Grimes on the beach in Aldborough in Suffolk in the UK. And the opera itself was written and it's staged in Aldborough. It is about a community, a fishing community in Aldborough. So that was why we did it on the beach there. But quite literally, the stage was at the water's edge. It was a long stage designed by Leslie Travis, and the backdrop was the sea. And it was we were exposed to the elements. I had to decide where I was going to put the lights, stay within a budget, which wasn't ginormous, how I was still going to manage to create light environments that supported the story, but that enforced the worlds once the sun went down. So we began in daylight and gradually it dipped into night. You could see the sea, you could see the sunset over the sea. So I was trying to blend nature with my artificial lighting. The biggest challenge was, how do you rig lighting towers on a stony beach and make them secure? Where do you put your front of house position? And how they don't blow over in a storm. And then, of course, we were having to program at night because we had to wait for it to get dark. And we were freezing cold. My programmer had to keep stopping every 20 minutes, even though she wore fingerless gloves, just to warm her fingers up. And I was in layer after layer. So there was kind of a physical challenge. There was a creative challenge. And then there was the challenge of how we could just get through it and get something great on stage. I think another challenge was when I had to first do a full length ballet, um, and it was at the Royal Opera House with Wayne McGregor, the choreographer, and we'd done many half-hour ballets, so short one-act ballets, but I had to learn how to create enough lighting design for something that was a three-act ballet that lasted, the performance itself, I guess, lasted 2 hours. So it was a challenge to expand my lighting designs to uh, maintain visual variety actually throughout a 2 hour process while you're still staying true to the themes and the story potentially that you're telling. And I found that one quite terrifying because it was on a very large platform. Lots of people were going to see it, but it was a challenge because, yeah, just expanding from what I'd been used to something bigger and longer. You know, I guess awards are like crazy because they're not really um, indicative of great work because so many great productions don't get recognized, so many great lighting designs don't get recognized. But I was all really proud of my first Night of the Illumination Award, which was for Chroma, which was a half-hour ballet with Wayne McGregor at the Royal Opera House. And perhaps one of the reasons I was most proud of it was because while I was doing that production, I just had my first child. So I was kind of breastfeeding while I was making it. I was juggling being a new parent while I was making it, and I'm very proud of that work. And it's a seminal work for Wayne's, amongst Wayne's productions. So I think, just from a personal point of view, when I think about that award, I think of not only, yeah, of those two things that I was achieving at the same time. My children have been at so many productions. When they were younger, they did used to travel with me and my partner. But it got to the point where my 7-year-old son once said, "Oh, I'm not going to see any more contemporary dance." Because by the time he was 7, he'd seen far too much abstract, kind of, yeah, abstract work that he couldn't understand. I think I've scarred them for life. I treat technology on a kind of needs must basis. So because I start from the ideas, um, I don't start from a piece of technology or a new piece of kit that I want to use and then incorporate it into my design. I start from the ideas and then discover what I need to use. Um, I see, the technological advances as a necessity. We have to keep moving forward, and especially in terms of sustainability, we've got to find new ways to achieve things that are more sustainable. Um, so, yeah, I embrace it all. It's all very interesting, and once in a while, a new bit of kit does come along that's very exciting, and that definitely uh, inspires me in a different way. I think the biggest technology development is in programming for me, because no matter how good the new light is, unless you have someone who can access all its attributes and help you play with it and realize what you want to realize, um, you can't use that bit of kit. So my programmer is super important to me, and the new desks just opening up so many avenues for the different things we can do as lighting designers. I think I am. more conscious about using the equipment that's in-house, if there is some, the equipment that's available to me before I go looking for stuff to hire. And then I try and make my rig work really hard. So anything that's in the rig needs to perform lots of functions. And I think that's a benefit of technology, is that the new lights that are being developed can be many things. They can be Fresnels and tight beam lights and profiles. They can do gobo work. They can be shuttered. They can be sharp. They can be soft. They can be any color you want them to be. So they can work very, very hard for their money when they're in a lighting rig. Other than that, I'm just conscious of not trying to spend budget on things that aren't necessary. And I'm conscious of using, so if I want something that looks like a light bulb, I'll ask the venue, do you have anything already? Because lots of lighting designers are using, light bulbs or fluorescent tubes or LED tape. And it's worth kind of using what's already in-house rather than always buying new. And that's kind of it. That's my little contribution, as small as it is, to trying to be more sustainable. I think it's a really tricky one to answer, I'm afraid. I know that I feel that I had to work twice as hard to get the same work that my colleagues were being offered. But I've been working in the industry 30 years. Things were very, very different in the first 10 years of my career, as opposed to the first 10 years of someone starting now. I guess it's interesting. I should think women are given the same opportunities these days, but whether women's personal lives get more in the way, whether the fact that, a lot of women have to take on more of the childcare roles. I didn't. I was very fortunate that I didn't have to take on the main childcaring role, but whether other elements hinder their opportunities in the industry, I don't know. I find it very surprising now that when I read a list of the creative team on productions, that I'm still seeing all male creative teams. I find that worrying because perhaps there aren't enough women in the industry to influence those kind of lists where it's all men. I think you've got to be prepared to work really hard and to be quite strong and considered about what direction you want to move in. Yeah, I think that's advice for anybody, not just women. But I would say, don't let it, if there is any discrimination, or if you sense any discrimination because you're a woman, you've just got to develop a thicker skin and get through it, because not every situation is going to be like that. This is advice in life. This is the kind of advice I'd give my daughter anyway. You're always going to, not just women, but there's always going to be some kind of discrimination. And you've just got to move through it and get onto the next project, because the next project won't be the same. I think it's hard. I'm still giving myself advice, I'm still having to uh, tell myself to be strong and tell myself not to let it bother me on so many levels. So, I don't feel equipped to advise people.